All right, I'm excited to introduce a colleague and friend, Cody Schweitzer. Cody, come on out here. So Cody is with the Chronicle of Philanthropy. How many of you have heard of the Chronicle of Philanthropy? All right, good.
Thanks.
What if they said nobody answered?
Deeply depressing.
Depressing, absolutely. Since we were talking about media not that long ago. Tell me what's happening at the Chronicle, real quick.
We just came off of a big redesign and relaunch in March. New website, new format for the print publication, and really exciting.
Good. All right, kick us off with Gary.
I'm happy to introduce Gary Knell. Gary brings decades of experience in media and education to his role as president and CEO of National Geographic, where he has advanced the organization's work around science, exploration, and storytelling. During his, before National Geographic, he served as CEO at National Public Radio, and during his 22-year tenure with Sesame Workshop, he was instrumental in focusing the organization on Sesame Street's worldwide mission, including the creation of groundbreaking co-productions in South Africa, India, Northern Ireland, and Egypt. He was also a strong advocate of innovation and technologies to draw new audiences to public media. Gary, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be at MCON.
Great. So National Geographic is an organization that's 127 years old. You're in a position that was once held by Alexander Graham Bell. Put things in context.
They had to find a guy whose name rhymed with Bell. That was it. So.
It's a prerequisite. It's good to know. Given your history, given how old the organization is, how do you stay relevant in a very different media environment from when you were founded?
Well, it's obviously a little different than 127 years ago. But you know, the mission is the same. And it's really about trying to diffuse geographic knowledge, to inspire, to illuminate and teach, as we like to say. So inspiring through science and exploration, illuminating through storytelling, and teaching kids, especially, a geographic competency, which they're going to need to make the world a better place, and also really to be employable. So this is something that's in a global economy. So we think the relevance of National Geographic is as important or more important today than it even was 127 years ago.
So where are you focusing your efforts, both in the grants that you're making and in the content that you're producing?
Well, we're trying to push, a science and exploration agenda, and we do all kinds of things, as you know, and we have tried now to formulate some real pillars around different content agendas. Specifically, we've chosen oceans to be one. The state of the world's ocean, as it really should be called, only 5% of the ocean is mapped, believe it or not. So there's a lot of work to be done cartographically. There's a lot of work to be done in storytelling, and most importantly, in providing sanctuaries for so much of the ocean that has become despoiled, as it is so much the lungs of planet Earth, as Sylvia Earle likes to call it. Wildlife protection, as you can see, is another one, and I think you've had speakers up here talk about some of the challenges that we're seeing globally, that we've gone from with tens of thousands of elephants being wiped out in countries like Tanzania over the last decade, and the tiger population decreasing in this century from 100,000 to 3,000. And these are just shocking figures that National Geographic, we feel we can do something about in exposing some of the stories, both good stories about how people are working bravely in the field to make a difference, and some of the stories around criminal syndicates that are behind the wildlife trafficking trade that we see around the world. And last year we gave an award to Brian Christie, who is an award-winning journalist who covered the mob in South Philadelphia, and now is tracking wildlife trafficking and criminal syndicates in Asia at the same time. Those kinds of people who are really important. And finally, antiquities, and we've all been reading about some of the challenges that have been happening in the Middle East, to say the least. But this is a story about Egypt. This is a story about Peru. This is a story that is about saving our world's treasures. And these kinds of pillars now we have a capability in using all of our platforms across social media, across a television, where we have 2 big cable channels which reach over 500 million people around the world every day. We've got short form video capability. We've got an ability now to reach folks through print still, live events, museum exhibitions. So what we're trying to do is gather all of those in kind of a 360 approach to reach people where they are. And that's now a necessity as all of us live every minute of every day in this incredibly cluttered environment of content that lights up our pockets every 12 seconds. So this is the world we live in, and this is a huge adjustment for all of us who are running these kinds of legacy media organizations.
And talking about that attention, and especially on mobile and technology and social media, how are you using those to reach new audiences at National Geographic?
Well, we have the benefit of photography, so that helps. I think just a few weeks ago, we passed 1 billion likes on Instagram. B as in billion. I think we're ahead of Kim Kardashian now. I'm trying to... or close. I know we're ahead of LeBron, but anyway. But we're right up there, and these are huge numbers. It's by far the most popular item on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Google+, and all these platforms. Snapchat chose us among 6 or 7 other media organizations to present their new platforms. We're on the instant news application that Facebook is putting out now. And we've got to be agnostic about platforms. We've got to be in a place where everyone can reach us, and they're not solely attentive to only, a magazine they're getting in the mail or turning on a cable channel. And as we all know, and as everyone in this audience and online knows, that world is now fraying to some degree. And we're having to face a whole new way of engaging with people about what we think is really important content that is compelling, but needs to be compelling as a native application, so to speak, to whichever platform that we have.
Yeah. Let's talk a second about print specifically, which is the real heritage of National Geographic. The yellow frame up there, it's kind of one and the same with National Geographic. People really understand the print publication. What role does that play going forward?
Well, I get asked this question a lot, including by my own staff, as you can imagine. What's the future of print? It's not going away. Our book sales are doing well, and children's book sales especially are doing well. And I know from my own kids who are millennials that, and I don't know if you guys here experience the same thing, but sometimes you need a break from the electronic fire hose, and it's great to just pick up a paper book, right, as a vacation from, and as a way of just stepping back and being able to think about something for more than, that's not one of my family members, by the way, but as a vacation. And that's like a bad statement about Neanderthals reading print, but that's not what we're about. So we have about 8 million subscribers globally with the print magazine, and we just launched a new print magazine called History here in the U.S. and in Spain and France, which is doing quite well. So there's still a market out there, and I think part of it is photography, part of it is just an ability to step back and turn things off and reconnect with the printed word, and I think that's something that is going to be around for a while. Now, with that said, we know that the audiences are completely migrating, a lot of the audience, to digital platforms, and as we all know, and I tried to when I was both at NPR and at Sesame Street, you were all born as digital natives, so to speak, and people in my generation were digital immigrants. And I used to talk about the refrigerator and how my grandmother always talked about the refrigerator. You know, it was this incredible thing, the ice box, you know, and I never thought about the refrigerator. You know, it's an appliance, right? And the same goes true for all of these media devices that we all carry in this auditorium. These are appliances. I mean, I don't think people think of them anymore as this, whoa, look at this amazing thing, you know. Sure, we have a new app, or Apple comes out with some new iPhone 17 or whatever it is. It's going to do incredible things, you know, cook your dinner and all that stuff. But I think these are appliances that are just part of our lives now. And so in order, like for Sesame Street, in order to reach kids around literacy and numeracy and health messages and social and emotional lessons, or National Geographic to reach people around oceans or wildlife or antiquities, or the other things we focus on, we've got to be delivering to people on these kinds of appliances that are just part of their regular life. And that's a huge shift and a huge challenge, and you're doing that at the same time when you're trying to continue, you know, a legacy business, and that's where the challenge is. And all of the things you're reading in the paper about the New York Times and the television networks and everybody else and National Geographic having to go through this transition now. Some of us are going to make it, and some of us have already died. I mean, there's a whole catalog of enterprises, of magazines and others who just haven't made it through this, and we're determined not to let that happen, which is why we're investing in social media, and which is my colleague Raj Modi is out in the audience, who runs social media here, is doing a fantastic job promoting this concept that you can access National Geographic on Snapchat. And that's an important thing for people who that's their means of media. That's their media diet every day.
Makes sense. Shifting ahead a little bit and thinking about your mission to educate and protect the environment, how can millennials make a difference there?
Yeah, so one of the things, and one of the reasons why I took this job, I was asked, you know, I had to go through a job interview too. I had to go through several, actually. And one of the trustees of National Geographic said, what's the most important issue facing America today? And I said to myself, uh-oh, if I get this wrong, it's like, I'm done. And I said, education. And it was like, ding, 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 that's correct. You know, I expected Alex Trebek to run out and give me like. So education, to me, is still, for me personally, the most compelling reason to be here. This is an incredible platform. We're sitting on 100 years of digital content in a classroom on tablets, to being able to bring to life science and technology and our world and even the solar system in ways through powerful storytelling that kids can understand and engage in is an untapped, incredible asset. And I think we need more people who can get their heads around how do we access this, how do we use this in creative ways, how do we get these into classrooms, how do we make sure that kids in Detroit who are volunteering for the agriculture project also understand the geography of food. I think that's really important to understand. And we need people to really come to this with just throwing kind of the old rules aside and thinking through the ability for these new technology assets to be used to harness the power of the library and the storytelling assets that National Geographic have.
And that's, you're rolling out the geography education framework for long.
Exactly, and we've created a learning framework in the last year about what every first grader ought to know, fourth grader, eighth grader, 12th grader, and we'd be happy to share this with anybody about how to define geographic competency. And you know, you've probably seen a lot of these poll results where, you know, some huge number of American high school students can't find Japan on a map. And that's just unacceptable today. And especially in a global economy where he makes jokes about it and it's funny, but it really isn't funny. I mean, this is something that we need as a country, we owe our children. And I feel very passionate about this. And National Geographic is in the position to do something about this.
One of the questions from the social Q&A, not necessarily the most difficult issue facing us, but what is the hardest story to cover that's most critical right now?
Well, that's a good question. There's so many, but we're trying to focus on those issues that I mentioned. We're going to spend and really focus on issues that are relevant. Some of you probably saw last month we had the cover story on marijuana, weed, which was you couldn't miss this. You couldn't miss this cover. It was very popular in Northern California, especially. The weed cover in your face was something that it was around the science of marijuana and how that has changed whether it's how much more powerful it is, addictiveness, all these other issues. And it hasn't been covered a lot. We're going to focus in the November issue on climate change. The entire issue of National Geographic will be on climate change and covering all different aspects from the revolution of energy policy in Germany that's happening to the impact on Florida's coastline, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a way of accessing complex questions that our world is facing, and the debates about marijuana on the one hand, and trying to bring some rational discussion around the war on science, which was in an issue a couple of months ago, where we talked about scientific research regarding things like climate change, immunizations, GMOs, et cetera, that are raging debates. And there's scientific debates, and then there's political debates, and sometimes those get conflated. But we are, I think, a place where we can provide a forum that's a little bit not so hysterical as we see every night on cable news, et cetera, where people can rationally discuss issues and try to come to some better place.
And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but thinking of something like Snapchat, where you're very active, Instagram, where you're very active, how do you get people to go from those networks where they might be Bieber, LeBron, National Geographic, and on out? How do you get them to engage from that network in a deeper way with the causes you cover and also with the organization?
Well, we do feel that the power of photography, the power of videography makes a big difference. And at the end of the day, storytelling is what teaches. And Jane Goodall and the people you saw in that video, each one of them are incredible scientists and explorers, but each one of them are fantastic storytellers. And their ability to make us care about primates, or make us care about melting glaciers, or make us care about the oceans is something that we try to provide as a forum. And we think that getting these compelling stories out through these new platforms is an opportunity that people will engage more. We also have a program that we do every year called Emerging Explorers, where we honor 12 to 15 explorers under the age of 30 who are chosen, who are doing like incredible things around the world, from redefining nuclear energy to creating new ways of handling coral robotically, and the rangers of Virunga National Park in the Congo, who are risking their lives every day to protect a precious place for primates in a very troubled part of the world. So we're able to bring attention to those kinds of projects to promote idealism and innovation. It's many things that MCON is also doing, and the Case Foundation that I want to throw a shout out to for their support, because it is about taking chances and promoting ways of making a difference, and that's what we're trying to build an ethos in National Geographic, 127 years young.
Yeah. The top question right now from social Q&A is a tough one. What do you think is more important to explore, the ocean or space?
Oh, that's a good, what's the next question? How many say oceans? Look, I guess the answer to that question is we have a philosophy at National Geographic, which is, I think, kind of unique and something I've come to appreciate in the year and a half I've been there, which is human beings need to be given information that they should be concerned about, what is otherwise known as worry. So we do need to know about problems in the world, and God knows we have many, and we only have to turn on the news media some way to just be completely blanketed with worry. But human beings also need wonder, and they need to be inspired with hope about the next frontier. Now, it just so happens that there's a lot of frontier in both of those places. As I mentioned, the ocean, 5% mapped. The ocean isn't appreciated as the lungs of the globe, and so much of our life on Earth is based on the health of the ocean. I grew up in Southern California, and I used to go to the beach as a kid, but it was just, an infinite body of water that you never thought could be harmed, and we all now know that's not true. So there's a sense of urgency, but there's also a sense, and we get a lot of young people, marine biologists and others who are out there, including like in this picture, this young explorer who we awarded a couple of weeks ago. She quit her job and went out, is now creating shark sanctuaries out in the Pacific. So this kind of inspiration, I think, is critical. And at the same time, we got people like Kobe Boykins, who's a young jet propulsion lab scientist who's doing the Mars rovers. And that stuff is incredibly compelling and gives people something to think about, possibilities. And if we can land these rovers, which we are doing, on Mars, and sending back these incredible pictures every single day, and eventually soil samples and things like that, what is it that we can't do is the message that gives. And the answer is we can do a lot of things that we're just not getting done. So part of the innovations and why I wanted to come here today was to salute what you guys are doing, what MCON is doing in trying to promote innovation and to tackle these what seem like intractable problems with creative ways through technology and through using the power of crowdsourcing and every other way to make a difference in the world around issues that beat so many people down. And I think this is what National Geographic, I hope, is an inspiration by highlighting these kinds of people who are doing incredible things underwater and out in space, among other places, that there's nothing we really can't do.
The top question right now, social Q&A, is how do you deal with countries that seek to censor journalists? And expanding that out a little bit, National Geographic has put reporters and photographers in places that really no one else can go to, or that it's not necessarily safe to go to, in refugee camps. How do you deal with those situations as an organization?
It's a good question, and I've had this issue in pretty much all of the places that I've been associated with. National Geographic publishes 41 local language editions of the magazine, of which there's a lot of local content, and we're published pretty much all around the world. And what we've got to do, and even at Sesame Street, we were working in the Middle East and the Balkans and other countries where there have been troubles. And we had to be consistent with our brand. And I think what you find is people who sign up to be part of this family of National Geographic or Sesame Street or whatever, who believe in the brand and who are going to promote those same kind of values, and that is critical. So we've relied on partners in each of these countries who carry our values and are going to promote scientific accuracy and fairness and be able to highlight the kinds of innovations I've just been talking about. If they don't share those values, we shouldn't have them as a partner, and that hasn't really been as big a problem as you think. And also, this is a brand that's viewed, I think, by most countries in the world as scientific and educational, not particularly a political organization. So I think you're able to promote those ideas. We're working in China, for instance, around a lot of environmental issues, which the Chinese are rightfully obsessed about. And anyone who's been to Beijing recently knows what I'm talking about. It's hard to breathe the air, and the Chinese aren't happy about that either. So bringing those issues to bear is something that I think is welcomed, and we're trying to talk about those things in forums and through our media enterprises that make a difference.
National Geographic, I mean, it's the National Geographic Society. It's a community, really. It's membership-based. What steps are you taking to kind of build that community and that identity? You talk about your brand ambassadors around the world.
Yeah. Well, this is, to me, a big opportunity. And the irony here is that when Alexander Graham Bell was around, and by the way, he was sort of a Steve Jobs of his own era. He had this crazy idea to put photographs in the magazine, and 2 of the board members quit over this, by the way, because they thought it would dumb down National Geographic. Like, they were wrong. So it tells you that not always the board of directors are right. And Steve Jobs, I think, went back to Apple and fired the entire board of directors. So those board members of mine who are watching this, forget I just said that. Okay, no, but the point really is that you need those kinds of innovators. And Bell and his colleagues promoted this idea that you were part of a tribe, as Seth Godin, the marketing executive, likes to talk about. You're part of a family. You know, one of our advertisers, sponsors, Rolex, has been with National Geographic for 61 years, okay? So I went to Geneva and I gave them a copy of the first issue they ever advertised in from 1954. And on the page it says, tell people you read National Geographic, it defines you. And I said, maybe Don Draper wrote that. But there was somebody over at Leo Burnett down the road here on Michigan Avenue who probably did think of it. But it's exactly right. It is really about buying into a philosophy. And I do believe what the web and what our digital world has now turned loose, in a way, is a set of membership organizations, tribes, affiliations, families, whatever you want to call them, good and bad, by the way, who are people associated with the National Geographic Society, the Chicago Bears, you know, the Rolling Stones, whatever your thing is, and that is a group of people who now you become associated with. National Geographic has a wildly broad group of tens of millions of people around the world who watch the channel. The vice premier of China told me she watches the channel, and the baggage handler in Turkey told me he watches the channel. That's the wide range we have. Tens of millions of people who are on Instagram, Facebook, television, print, etc. Our challenge now is how do we connect these people around, as Bill called it, a membership, where people are going to engage with each other around content. And this is a huge differentiator from the media world of the past, which was hierarchical. And you had an editor saying, everyone in March shall learn about Sri Lanka, you know? And that's not really the world as we live in anymore. So this is now about a balance of giving people what they want, listicles, and giving people what they need to know. And you don't want to become a listicle entity, National Geographic, but on the other hand, you've got to present what people need to know in a way that's compelling. And that's where Raj and his colleagues are working so hard every day to make that happen. So this idea of membership is one that's very powerful. And people can connect on travel. Around travel, they can connect around discussing climate change. They can connect around what's going on with ISIS and the destruction of antiquities. We can build social movements even around some of these things through the power and this umbrella of this brand. And I think that's a really compelling, exciting future.
Absolutely. Well, our time is up.
Well, thanks.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Gary.
everybody.